Okay, the fact that I am a woman, okay, and I am the person that is saying this, okay, the fact that there are so many conservative commentators who pretend that they're so brave.
What if I told you the most outspoken conservative woman in America might be risking everything, her career, her safety, even her life, just for telling the truth about Israel? This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's happening right now. By 2017, Candace Owens' voice was echoing across YouTube, where her sharp commentary and unapologetic views drew massive attention. Her rise led her to join Turning Point USA, where she took on the role of communications director and later helped establish Blexit, a movement encouraging political independence within the Black community. Owens remained deeply involved with the organization until May 2019, before shifting her focus to a broader media career. In November 2020, she signed with the Daily Wire, launching her own talk show, Candace, the following March 2021. The collaboration, however, came to an end on March 22, 2024. Tensions had already begun to mount. In late 2023, when Owens started questioning aspects of Israel's policies and Zionism, a move that stirred significant controversy within media and political circles, such criticism often sparks backlash. Figures like Nick Cannon had faced severe consequences for similar remarks. Yet Owens' trajectory didn't follow that familiar script. Rather than fading from relevance, her split with the Daily Wire marked a new chapter. In the aftermath, Candace Owens' influence only grew stronger within conservative circles. Her willingness to speak openly about sensitive global issues, particularly regarding Israel, resonated with a segment of the movement, increasingly skeptical of mainstream narratives. In defying the expectations of silence, she transformed from a conservative commentator into a symbol of unfiltered conviction and independence.
It makes me realize how much we have lost what it means to be a real man in society. The fact that I am a woman, okay, and I am the person that is saying this, okay, the fact that there are so many conservative commentators who pretend that they're so brave because they're talking about like what happened in the latest Trump thing, blah, blah, and then on the topic of their mom, okay, I should not be the only one calling out how many times Zionists defend and criminals. This is not normal, okay? Why does Israel allow from America to flee and receive protection from their state? Why are we, the country that's funding their bullshit, okay, not allowed to extradite our files? Okay, does anybody have an answer? I don't know, show hands. Anybody like, oh no, that's totally normal. It makes total sense. Like, Candace, even asking the question is anti-Semitic. Like, no, guys, there's like a problem here that we can't get our back from a nation that we've given billions of dollars to. That doesn't make sense. Why would you want, as a small nation that is the size of New Jersey, okay, why would you want to free?
In one of her most controversial turns, Candace Owens began addressing deeply sensitive allegations related to Israel. She referenced claims that certain individuals, accused of serious crimes against minors in the U.S., had found refuge in Israel, shielded from extradition. Her pointed question was simple, yet provocative. How can America continue to fund a nation that, she suggests, protects those who harm children while taking U.S. aid dollars? It was a statement that landed with the force of a thunderclap, raw, emotional, and impossible to ignore. Owens didn't stop there. Her outrage intensified, and in an unmistakably fiery moment, she declared that she would rather saw off her own foot than ever support Israel again, in absolute severance from a position once common among conservatives. She accused the Israeli government of acting in ways entirely opposed to Christian values, claiming that blind allegiance had replaced moral accountability. Her remarks were striking not only for their content but for their boldness. Within mainstream conservative media, such open criticism of Israel is almost unheard of. Figures like Nick Fuentes or Alex Jones may flirt with the topic, but few with Owens' platform have dared to voice it so directly. Owens went further, condemning those who ignored the suffering in Gaza, accusing certain Zionist figures of mocking, starving Palestinian children, and exhibiting what she described as sadistic behavior. To her, this wasn't just about politics, it was about humanity. She argued that the moral blindness toward Palestinian suffering couldn't last forever, predicting that the world would eventually take notice. In doing so, Owens aligned herself with a growing faction on the right, who believe that the conflict between Israel and Palestine has crossed into the territory of ethnic cleansing. While she's not a foreign policy expert, Her words echoed the sentiments of many disillusioned conservatives and libertarians. Even her former employer, Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire, had once weighed in on these complex debates, though from a very different angle. Candace Owens' stance marked a seismic shift, both for her personally and for the conservative movement at large, challenging a long-held political alliance and forcing her audience to confront uncomfortable questions about faith, morality, and global justice.
Ben Shapiro, in the year 2000, I think, wrote an article about ethnic cleansing. It said transfer is not a dirty word. And he's arguing for literal ethnic cleansing. Now, I have never argued anything close to that. I've never made the argument that we should ethnically cleanse blacks from the United States. But if I did, I'd be hanged by that forever.
Yeah.
Is Shapiro. Why and why not? He is not reminded of that every time he goes around, not because he apologized for it 20 years later, but because he has all the correct opinion.
Nick Fuentes has long stood as one of the most divisive figures in America's modern right-wing movement. A man whose notoriety has grown not because of careful political strategy, but because of his willingness to say what most others would never dare voice publicly. To his detractors, Fuentes is not merely provocative, he's openly racist, a provocateur whose rhetoric about race, religion, and national identity routinely crosses moral and ethical boundaries. His remarks about Black Americans have especially drawn condemnation, reflecting an ideology that leans more toward exclusion than debate. Fuentes' polarizing nature became a symbol of a deeper fracture within the conservative ecosystem. In one of his more infamous statements, he observed that if he were to advocate for the ethnic cleansing of Black people, he would be ostracized forever. Yet, in his view, certain other figures within the movement appear immune from accountability. He has repeatedly pointed to Ben Shapiro, a leading conservative voice and co-founder of the Daily Wire. As an example, Shapiro, Fuentes claims, can make inflammatory statements regarding the Middle East or Palestinians without facing the same cultural exile that would befall others. To Fuentes, this discrepancy illustrates what he perceives as a hierarchy of protection within conservative media, where one's background or ideological alliances determine how far they can push the line. Shapiro, being Jewish and a staunch defender of Israel, holds a privileged position. According to Fuentes, within a movement that publicly champions free speech yet privately polices which speech is acceptable, it's a controversial argument, one that mixes valid observations about media bias with conspiratorial undertones. Nevertheless, Fuentes' perspective resonated with a certain fringe of the online right, who saw his critique as confirmation that even within conservatism, some taboos remain sacred. But this conversation about bias and protected narratives extends far beyond Fuentes himself. It connects to a broader tension within American conservatism, a struggle between traditional party loyalty and the rise of populist, internet-driven dissent. Few figures embody this dynamic better than Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, TPUSA, and Candace Owens, his former collaborator. Kirk, who emerged in his early 20s as a charismatic voice for free market capitalism and campus conservatism, built TPUSA into one of the most powerful, youth-focused political organizations in the United States. With sleek branding, high-energy conferences, and a near-constant online presence, TPUSA became the entry point for thousands of young conservatives, eager to challenge progressive dominance on college campuses. Yet beneath its entrepreneurial spirit, the organization carried a distinct ideological message, one that tightly intertwined American patriotism with unwavering support for Israel. This alignment wasn't accidental. Over the past decade, a defining characteristic of mainstream conservative politics has been its near-unquestioning loyalty to Israel, shaped by religious, strategic, and ideological ties. Evangelical Christians view Israel as a cornerstone of biblical prophecy, while neoconservative thinkers have long framed it as America's indispensable ally in the Middle East. Kirk positioned himself firmly within this tradition. His speeches, social media campaigns, and public appearances often framed Israel not just as a partner but as a moral beacon, a democracy surrounded by enemies, fighting the same ideological battles that conservatives see at home. To many, this stance appeared consistent with conservative values, but to critics like Candace Owens, who once worked at TPUSA before charting her own independent path, Kirk's approach also revealed the deeper power structures operating within the movement. Owens has increasingly questioned what she sees as institutionalized loyalty to foreign interests, arguing that American conservatism sometimes prioritizes external allegiances over internal reform. In her view, young activists entering the conservative space are subtly conditioned to adopt a pro-Israel stance, not through open coercion, but through cultural expectation, a kind of ideological rite of passage. Her commentary has reignited debate about the boundaries of acceptable discourse within the right. Just as progressives face criticism for punishing dissent on social issues, conservatives to have their unspoken red lines, and Israel, Owens discovered, remains one of the brightest. Her willingness to challenge that orthodoxy has cost her allies, yet also expanded her following among those who feel constrained by traditional conservative institutions. Charlie Kirk's own reputation has become part of this evolving narrative. Once celebrated as a generational leader, a political wunderkind who turned student activism into a multi-million-dollar national movement, he now finds his legacy under scrutiny. Owens has alluded to what she describes as hidden truths and uncomfortable realities surrounding Kirk's network. Though she stops short of making direct accusations, her implication, however, is clear. The same establishment that claims to stand for freedom and open debate can also act as a gatekeeper, punishing those who question its sacred alliances. The connection between Kirk, Shapiro, and Fuentes underscores a fundamental paradox in American conservatism today. On one hand, the movement thrives on the rhetoric of anti-censorship and intellectual rebellion, the idea that conservatives are the last defenders of free thought. On the other hand, it polices dissent just as fiercely as the progressive spaces it critiques, particularly when that dissent threatens the party's global alliances or financial backers. Israel serves as the lightning rod for this contradiction, drawing fault lines between those who see criticism of Israeli policy as legitimate political discourse, and those who view it as a betrayal of Western values. Fuentes, with his inflammatory and often indefensible statements, represents one extreme of this rebellion, a manifestation of what happens when anger toward hypocrisy morphs into outright hate. Kirk represents the establishment center, organized, image-conscious, aligned with donor interests and political strategy. Owens, meanwhile, occupies a volatile middle ground, a populist insurgent challenging the establishment from within, yet unwilling to associate herself with figures as toxic as Fuentes. The resulting dynamic is messy, but revealing. It shows a conservative movement in flux, no longer monolithic, increasingly fractured between corporate-aligned institutions and grassroots voices hungry for authenticity. For many young conservatives, especially those disillusioned with both political parties, Owens' outspokenness on topics like Israel, censorship, and elite influence strikes a chord. She embodies a brand of ideological independence that feels rare in an era dominated by talking points. Still, her evolution also exposes the risks of iconoclasm in modern politics. To question the wrong alliance, even from within one's own tribe, is to risk exile. In that sense, Candace Owens' story mirrors the very hypocrisy that Fuentes rants about, though she presents her critique with far more tact and legitimacy. Her tension with Charlie Kirk, once her ally and mentor, symbolizes the broader unraveling of unity within American conservatism, a movement wrestling with its identity in the age of information, influence, and moral compromise. Ultimately, the tangled relationships among Fuentes, Shapiro, Kirk, and Owens illustrate more than personal drama. They expose the ideological fault lines defining 21st century conservatism. It's no longer simply left versus right, progressive versus conservative. It's establishment versus insurgent, loyalty versus authenticity, narrative control versus genuine free thought. And in that struggle, the question isn't just who speaks the loudest, but who is still allowed to speak at all. Under Kirk's leadership, Turning Point USA became more than a youth organization. It evolved into a powerful cultural pipeline for shaping young conservatives' views, including their alignment with pro-Israel narratives. Owens herself, along with figures like Brandon Tatum, entered the conservative spotlight through TPUSA, which played a crucial role in elevating their platforms. Many young conservatives who passed through the organization describe it as a formative, and at times, indoctrinating experience, one that tightly linked patriotism, free market ideals, and loyalty to Israel. Now, with Owens openly questioning those alliances, the very network that once united conservative voices around shared causes appears increasingly fractured.
And we know that Israel has no qualms when it comes to torturing Americans like they're torturing Greta Thunberg right now. Or I guess she was released, but they tortured her alongside, there's still like 18 Americans still in the Israeli torture prison right now. and citizens from 44 countries all over the world are still being tortured because they were trying to bring aid by boat to the coast of Gaza and help alleviate some of the starvation that is doing to the Palestinian people, starving them to death as they had.
Apparently, those who have been part of Turning Point USA often claim that the organization provides materials strongly encouraging support for Israel, framing it as a central tenet of conservative loyalty. For many, this isn't just a suggestion, it's an expectation. Now, when it comes to Candace Owens, her recent criticisms of Israel and Zionism have led some supporters to express concern for her safety. The tone of her commentary has become increasingly bold, directly challenging long-standing political alliances. She has discussed Charlie Kirk's death in this context, not by accusing Israel of involvement, but by questioning inconsistencies surrounding the case. Owens has repeatedly clarified that she is not alleging Israeli responsibility, yet she emphasizes that certain details surrounding the tragedy simply don't add up. The official narrative points to Tyler Robinson, the alleged shooter who remains in custody, yet, in online spaces, speculation has taken on a life of its own. Some conspiracy-minded commentators have begun suggesting that Kirk's death might be tied to his affiliations or to unseen political interests, particularly those connected to Israel. Owens herself hasn't endorsed those claims, but her willingness to question the official story has fueled further suspicion and debate. What makes this situation so striking is the broader pattern. It touches on individuals who openly criticize Israel often find themselves under intense scrutiny or backlash. In political circles, especially within conservatism, speaking against Israel can be seen as crossing a forbidden line. For many observers, that climate of fear and consequence only deepens the intrigue surrounding Owens' defiance and the ripple effects it continues to cause throughout the conservative movement.
Just a package filled with text messages, emails, private communications, videos, and private legal documents. So if anything happens to me, you guys will know exactly who it is that has been making my life a living hell over the past couple of years. People that are trying to bankrupt me and my family, that are threatening us to sue us. Everything that Kanye said was so real. Okay, I'm now at that point where you look back and you go, man, Kanye was right. He was really saying something about what it takes to leave, to fight for custody of your own soul. Just leave me alone. Let me say what I believe and you say what you believe. Fight fair. Why do you always have to make this threat to bankrupt people? And I want you to know that those people, if anything happens to me, they have my explicit permission to release it all, detonate it all, expose all of these people in politics and in the movement who behave like this behind the scene.
Recently, a wave of creators and commentators have claimed that Americans currently stationed in Israel, some of whom were reportedly trying to provide food aid to Palestinians, are being mistreated or even tortured. This, they say, reinforces a troubling belief that publicly criticizing Israel comes with a price. Amid this tension, Candace Owens took to her podcast to deliver a chilling revelation. She disclosed that she had prepared what she called a life insurance policy of sorts, a package containing private text messages, emails, videos, legal documents, and other sensitive communications. She explained that she had distributed this material to trusted allies, instructing them to release everything publicly if anything were to happen to her. According to Owens, these files detail the individuals and organizations she claims have been trying to ruin her financially, threaten her family, and silence her voice, in her words. This ongoing campaign against her mirrored what Kanye West once described as the cost of defying powerful interests. Owens expressed exhaustion and frustration, asking only for the freedom to speak her truth without fear of financial or reputational retaliation. Her message was unmistakable. If she falls, the truth will not die with her shortly after. Owens shared a tweet listing prominent figures who now hold her confidential materials, including the Tate brothers, Dave Smith, Max Blumenthal, Tucker Carlson, and others. She granted them full permission to publish her communications with individuals like Seth Dillon, Dave Rubin, and organizations such as Turning Point USA, PragerU, and The Daily Wire. In that same post, she linked her actions to the recent death of Charlie Kirk, stating that those who speak truth to power must share information and let the truth rise up like a lion. This sparked fierce debate among conservatives. Some saw Owens as a brave whistleblower, Others viewed her as veering dangerously into paranoia and conspiracy. A growing number of Black conservative commentators have criticized her and Brandon Tatum, arguing that they've strayed from their original mission. As one critic put it, Owens and other prominent Black conservatives have stepped into political waters too deep to swim in. Their rise, he suggested, came from their unique position as Black voices in conservative spaces. But instead of using that platform to uplift their own communities, they've become entangled in geopolitical battles that don't directly advance Black empowerment. According to this view, by fixating on international controversies instead of issues like education, family stability, or economic growth within Black America, these figures have lost their footing. The argument goes further, claiming that many of them were propped up not to build their communities, but to criticize them for the approval of a larger conservative establishment. And now, as those alliances fracture, they're left vulnerable and isolated. The takeaway is sobering. While Candace Owens' courage in challenging entrenched power structures is undeniable, her current battles appear far removed from the mission that first catapulted her to prominence. In the beginning, she was celebrated as a fearless voice for independent thought within the Black community, someone who rejected political conformity and encouraged others to do the same. Her sharp critiques of identity politics, her insistence on and her ability to articulate frustration with cultural hypocrisy made her a standout in a movement often criticized for lacking diversity of perspective. Yet over time, many of her original supporters believe her focus has shifted. Instead of channeling her influence toward the issues she once claimed to champion, education, family, entrepreneurship, and cultural empowerment, she has increasingly immersed herself in global political disputes and ideological warfare. Her critics argue that in fighting the establishment, she has become entangled in it, that her voice, once a rallying cry for internal reform, now echoes across conflicts far beyond the reach of those she initially sought to uplift. They contend that had Owens remained rooted in the work of strengthening her own community, she might have cultivated a more enduring legacy, one defined not only by controversy, but by measurable impact. By turning her attention inward, she could have built institutions, inspired young leaders, and proven that conservative values could coexist with genuine advocacy for marginalized groups. Instead, she now finds herself walking a perilous line, one where influence and isolation coexist, and where every act of defiance risks overshadowing the purpose that once made her voice powerful in the first place.